Okay, I thought I would take this opportunity to go over some pieces and parts that are useful for your bike when you come out here to Utah and or Colorado to go riding with us. So I'm going to cover several things that I've put on my bike to kind of give you an idea of what it is that we use, and maybe it'll help you with setting up your bike as well. Hopefully I'll keep this video relatively short. So I'm going to start right here first. You see that I've got a Colorado green sticker, and I've also got a Utah green sticker. And if you're going to ride Colorado, regardless if you're plated or not, you have to have one of those stickers. And if you're going to ride Utah, you should have one of those stickers as well. Even though they will allow you to ride their trails on the roads and stuff with a license plate, we buy the stickers because it helps support their trail systems. So that's a suggestion. I recommend you get both stickers. You can go online to the state of Colorado or the Utah state parks, and you can get those stickers from those places online if you're out of state. All right, we'll go back here. We'll look. You can see my bike's got a plate on it, and the plate helps us whenever we're running on the roads. We do some trail riding on the roads, and that keeps the local sheriffs and police departments from harassing us. All they're really looking for is a license plate. They don't look too close, but they look for a license plate. You'll notice that I got a tail light. It's also hooked up as my brake light for the rear wheel. It doesn't work off the front wheel. Up in the front, I've got headlight, and on the Husabergs and most KTMs there's a high and low beam function. I don't know if you can see on mine, there's a little tiny bulb in there, and then there's a big bulb. I run it on the low beam function all the time. I have a switch on my handlebars to do that. Most of the KTMs don't come with that switch unless they're a European model. With my bike, being that it was a Husaberg, it came with this multi-function switch, and that gives me my kill switch, my horn, and my high-low beam, and an off switch for my light. So those are kind of hard to get. You got to look on the KTM websites, and a lot of times they're not available here in the States. They're only available as a European or Australian bike models. Okay. You notice I have a mirror for street legality. You're supposed to have a mirror, and I use mine to check my GoPro all the time to verify my GoPro's running. You could probably get by without the mirror, but you probably, I mean, if you want to keep the constabularies off your butt, a mirror would be a good idea. Up here on my handlebars, you also see that I got a RAM mount. That's where I mount my GPS. Other guys mount them across here. It's purely up to you, however way, if you want to run a GPS or not. I do all the time. It's how I keep us on the right trails, or at least try. On the KTMs, two-strokes anyway, this switch function, this is a KTM switch, came standard on the Husaberg. You can get it for your KTM. It's the switch that changes the ignition mapping from like a rain mode or a traction mode to a more powerful, more abrupt mode. When I'm in Utah riding the technical stuff, I typically run it in the low power mode. When we get on transfer sections, or we're going pretty quick, or we're in long four-wheel drive sections or whatever, I run it in the high-speed mode. On the 300s, it seems to make a bit of difference. On the 250s, it really doesn't make a lot of difference. Definitely on the 300s, when it's in the low mode, when the switch is pulled back to here, you can definitely feel the difference. Makes it a little bit easier to control the wheel spin if you're running in technical tight sections. Down here on the front wheel, you'll see that I've got a disc guard. I run the disc guards on the front because we just bang too many rocks. Even with the disc guard, I've bent rotors before. That's not the stock rotor. I have the original one, but it got bent. I straightened it. I keep it as a backup, and even with the disc guards, you can still end up with bent rotors. But without them, you're probably more likely to have a bent rotor than with one of those in place. You'll also see that I run the seal savers. I run the short ones. I don't run the full-length ones. Some people like the full-length ones. I don't. But I run the seal savers to try to keep the mud and grit and dirt out from underneath my seals. Seems to work pretty good. By the way, you'll notice on this wheel that I have it balanced with about 6 ounces of weights. That does help out quite a bit when you're doing high-speed sections, but it's not necessary. As far as the tube in that tire, I'm running just a heavy-duty tube. I don't run tubeless in the fronts. A lot of guys run tubeless in the fronts. I don't. But I do run the real heavy-duty tubes. Front tires, I kind of like the Shinko 546 Fatty, the 9100. This tire here is a Bridgestone X30 8100. It seems to work pretty good, but I don't know, I kind of like the Shinkos. They're real cheap. I tried the 216s. They didn't work very well. The side knobs ripped off. This tire's got probably 300-400 miles on it, and these knobs don't show any tearing at all, which is to my happiness. Okay, you'll notice that I got a horn down here. Again, that's more for street legality. I had to do it when I got this bike plated, and I just left the horn there. Sometimes it helps to have the horn when you're out there and you're trying to get guys' attention, but it's not a necessary item. The tugger strap. I strongly recommend you have one of those on your bike, because if we do need to help you and we're trying to pull you up out of a section, that tugger strap will be very, very handy for us to pull on the front end of your bike with. You can get those from a variety of places. They're not very expensive. Full wrap handguards. I run them. Most of the guys run the full wraps. We bang things so much. I mean, you can look at the end of mine, just see how much it's been on the ground and everything else. Seems to protect a lot of stuff. I wouldn't ride out there without the handguards, even though where we're going to ride in Utah, there's not a lot of trees that we're banging in, but there is a lot of rocks and other stuff. If you fall over, you can easily break levers. As far as levers go, I use these kind here that can, flex either way. That way, hopefully, I don't break levers. I carry spares with me. That's just part of the deal. My lever over here on the clutch side is a Midwest Mountain Engineering one, and it gives you less effort to pull that lever. You can see I can pull it with one finger easily. It's also a shorty lever, but it's got a notch here, which I prefer, so that my fingers can hook on it. It is not a flexible lever. It doesn't bend the opposite direction, but it's actually pretty robust. It is adjustable for engagement, but it's an expensive lever. Those are about $90. The The stock levers on KTMs and so forth are usually pretty good levers. You usually don't have to worry too much about just jumping right out and replacing those. But if you want something that's more or less unbreakable, so to speak, you know, think about that, putting them in. But do carry spare levers. The last thing you want to deal with is a broken lever out on a trail on a long ride and have to ride most of the day without a clutch or a brake lever. You see on this bike, I run the a Scotch stabilizer. I don't have a lot of tension in it, but it does help when we get into the sand washes, any kind of high-speed deflections that can occur when you're riding. The Scotch stabilizer just seems to work really, really well. I have GPR on Bo's bike. It works as well. You also notice that I've got I don't remember who makes those handlebars, Fastway Flex bars. They came on this bike. They actually do help with the vibration that the 300 engine produces and some of the shock loads that you get when you hit G-outs and hit a lot of rocks and stuff. So although they're very expensive, I think on a 300 they're probably worth their money. The new 300s that are counterbalanced, that vibrate less, probably less of an issue. And then there are other shock mount things for your handlebars now. There are deals here that you can get. You know, I don't know that they're really necessary, but we tend to ride long days out in Utah, and when we do so, having something that helps ease that upper arm, shoulder stress is always a good thing. I also have some bar risers here on mine. I put them on a couple of years ago just to try to match Bo's bike, and for the same height that he has his, because his GPR is a sub mount one, and so if we switch bikes or whatever, I like to have the handlebars at the same height. That's really about the only reason those are on there. Some more stuff up here on the front of the bike. You'll see in here that I've got Enduro Engineering radiator braces. Now, they're not a guard in the front, and we don't deal with a lot of roost. We're not motocross racing, but we get side impacts. And I absolutely think these are a must if you're going to ride with us in Utah. Without it, you're going to break a radiator. It's only going to take one drop and the rocks, and the side of your radiator is going to get crushed, and you're going to have your end of your ride. We had a guy drop his bike, just barely drop it a few years ago, and you know, it was one of them tip overs on flat surface actually, and he bent his radiator, created a leak, and kind of ruined his whole deal. He ended up having to ride a different bike the rest of the day, the rest of that week. He rode this one actually one day, and then he rode my XR250 on another day because his radiator was broken. It was leaking. So definitely, if you don't have a gas tank that comes around here and protects the radiators, you need to have a set of radiator guards on the bike. Without them, you will be walking. You'll also notice that I got a carbon fiber pipe guard. We bang so many rocks, and even though without the pipe guard you will dent the pipe, and that's usually not the end of the world. With the pipe guard, some guys argue that you'll bend the pipe. I used to run without the pipe guards. We bent the pipes all the time. I'd have to fix them every winter. I started running a pipe guards probably 4 or 5 years ago, and yeah, I do get bent pipes, but I'd prefer, I think it's better to have the pipe guard. There's just so many rocks in Utah and here in Colorado that we bash into, and otherwise you're just gonna dent the crap out of your pipe. Typically when I go to Utah for 4 or 5 days of riding, I take a spare pipe anyway, just in case something really bad happens. Down here, you'll notice that I have a skid plate. Now that's a standard KTM or Husaberg plastic skid plate. And a lot of guys think that those aren't very strong and they don't last very long. That one's been on there since I had this bike. This bike is 8 years old, and I wouldn't ride without it. We just simply bash too much stuff. You're going to break your case covers. You're just going to have all kinds of trouble. So skid plate of some kind, whether you want an aluminum one or a plastic one or any of the fancy high dollar ones, definitely put one on your bike before you go to Utah. As far as the shift lever, you can see I got a little bit different shift lever. It's an aftermarket piece. I carry a spare in my backpack. Again, you break a shift lever while you're out there on the trail, your day is over. The other thing that happens with KTMs is they tend to, this bolt comes loose. Red Loctite that bolt. When it comes loose, the lever will kind of come out a little bit and you won't be able to shift, and that'll be your indication that the bolt's come loose. But if you don't want to deal with the bolt coming loose, red Loctite that bolt. It's the simplest thing to do. I put a standard lock washer on the bolt, and then I red Loctite it. Okay, let's talk about carburetor stuff. You can see on my carburetor I run a adjustable, an aftermarket idle adjustment screw and an aftermarket air screw. I run a JD jet kit in it, and I go by JD's recommendations for altitude. In western Colorado and central Utah, you're going to be between 4,000 and 7,000 feet altitude. So if you go with JD's kit and you just jet based on his specs, your bike's going to run pretty doggone good. I also run an inline filter. Not all fuel line connections are going to make it easy for you to put that on, but if you can fit one on there, I recommend it. Obviously on the new fuel injected bikes, this conversation's moot. As far as the fuel tank, my tank is 2.9 gallons. Bo runs a 3.4 gallon tank. When we do days of 80-90 miles, those tanks are sufficient. Bo can actually go further than that. The stock tanks are only 2.6 gallons. Some of them are only 2.4 gallons. You'll be limited to about 70 miles on those tanks. You may want to consider investing in a larger tank or a means to carry fuel when we do longer days. If we're going to do a day of 70 miles or less, you'll be fine. But if we're going to do days where we're going to do 80-90 miles, you're going to need to carry gas, or if you have a bigger tank, you'll be in good shape. Gearing. Stock KTM gearing is fine. On Bo's bike, we run 1350. On this bike, I run 1451. Not for any particular reason. That's a little bit taller gearing than 1350 is, but it seems to work. This is a 6-speed transmission here in the Husaberg. The gearing in first gear is plenty low, and 6th gear I can run 90 miles an hour if I needed to. Bo's bike with the 1350 is more than adequate. I have a 2007 KTM 250XC that I ran 1352 on for a while. Gave it a lot of low-end power, torque, but it limited its top speed. You know, if we were transferring in sections, we couldn't go much more than 50 miles an hour. So even though that was really cool gearing for, you know, a lot of oomph, it wasn't really the best. So I've gone back to, I believe, 1350 gearing on that, and it works just fine. Make sure that your chain guides are in excellent shape. You know, you get over there and you find that you don't have a chain guide that's working, and you're just going to cut into your swing arm. It's going to end your ride. Make sure that your rear sprocket chain guide is in good shape and that it's not going to derail your chain. You're going to hit all kinds of rocks. We tear these things up terribly. So you're going to need to make sure that that's in good shape. Make sure your kickstand's functional. You're going to be parking in the desert and in the middle of rocky terrain where there isn't any trees or anything you can lean up against. If you don't use this, I highly recommend you do. It'll keep your kickstand from getting loose down here and falling off. It's just a good idea to always put that on KTMs because their kickstand mechanism can be a little a little less than optimum. Make sure your sprockets and your chain is in good order. Don't come out there with a rusted up, worn out chain. You're just not going to be a happy camper. Okay, you can see on my bike I've got a rack back here. It's a ProMoto billet rack. That's a lot of money to put one of those on there, and it's a bit of a challenge to get them to fit, but it gives me the ability to put a Rotopack fuel pack back there. I can put a 1 gallon pack on there. I put an attachment on here, and then I can screw it down. Pack sits there, and I don't even notice it's back there. It's a really cool option, but it is expensive, so consider that. Rear wheel. I run, this is not the original brake rotor. I replaced it a few years ago. It's a solid rotor. Seems to help dissipate the heat a little bit better, I think. I run EBC sintered metal brake pads. They work pretty good, but if you're doing a lot of downhill stuff, especially out here with long downhills, you'll heat up your brake fluid and boil it, and you'll end up without any brakes. I run Motul, what is it? The Motul 600 brake fluid. Yeah, the RF 600 brake fluid, which has got the highest boiling point of any .5.1, or maybe that one's a .4 fluid. Because we boil brakes out here all the time. It just happens. Make sure you have a spark arrestor. KTMs do not come with a spark arrestor. You need to have a spark arrestor running out here. I do not recommend the kind that are screens. The screens will plug up and leave you stranded. We've had that happen to multiple guys with 2 strokes. 4 strokes, not such a big deal, but 2 strokes, they'll carbon up, plug up the screen, and then your bike won't run worth a darn. We've yanked out those screens multiple times in the field. I strongly recommend you get a FMF or a Pro Circuit spark arrestor for your bike. Make sure it's the kind developed for a 2-stroke, and you should be fine. Rear disc guards. You gotta have that. If you don't have that, you will bend and destroy a rear disc. We get in too many tight rock sections. You can see my disc guard is all beat to heck. The ones that I recommend are, I think that's an Enduro Engineering one. This whole piece is part of the whole deal that mounts your brake caliper. Very, very, very strong. I don't really like just the ones that bolt on to something here. They don't last very long. Tubeless in the rear. Definitely run those. Pinch flats will occur. We hit too many sharp edge rocks in Utah. You're hitting them at speed. Everybody says, oh, I'm not going to hit any steps. Yeah, well, wait till you come out here. You're going to hit plenty and you're going to have pinch flats. We've been running these for 10 years now, and it just eliminates the whole issue of pinch flats. I'm running a Shinko 505 cheater rear tires, and with those I can run about 8 pounds of air pressure over in Utah. Some guys run less. I choose to run about 8 because otherwise the rim, your tire will compress clear to the rim. You can get cuts in the tires. You get a hole. We carry these inflators and half a dozen or so CO2 cartridges, and we take plugs. We plug tires. We're back riding in 5 minutes. So strongly recommend you carry those kinds of things. If you're going to run tubes, recommend you carry a spare front tube. The front tubes will fit in the rear. They will also fit in the front, and it'll get you out of there. You're going to have to carry a spare tube. We carry them anyway, even with the tubeless systems. We have had faults with the internal inner tube. If you see this red deal up here, this is what fits inside there, and there's a tube that fits in that, and it blows it out, creates the seal. We've had those puncture before, so we do carry tubes even though we run tubeless. I suppose you could run a Moose if you really want to deal with that. Then you won't have to have any tubes spare. I'm going to switch to this IRC V33S Jacata gummy tire for my ride in Utah this year. It's got much taller knobs. This tire is really cold, so it's been sitting out here in the garage. But that's a gummy. It's got a lot of flex to it. A couple of the guys have been running them. They really, really like them, so I'm going to try it. Hopefully I'll like it out in Utah. You can see my brake. I safety wire this so that it can't get lost, and I run a link there so that if this gets hit, it can't be bent out. That's an aftermarket foot piece, just something that I put on. That would be something that you might want to consider. The tether is the most important part. I just make mine out of safety wire. Okay, I think I'm about out of things to tell you. Again, radiator guards, a must. Some sort of heavy-duty tubes, absolutely a must. Front and rear brake disc guards, a must. Pipe guard, it's your choice. I consider it a must. Suspension settings, set them up soft. You're not racing out there. You're going to be riding over a lot of really rough stuff. You want a very comfortable ride. Otherwise, you're going to have blistered palms, bloody hands after the first day. Set your suspension up for off-road, not for racing. On my air filters, I run filter skins, and I know a lot of guys clean their filters every day out there in Utah. I don't bother. If it gets really dusty and I see that the filter is really just caked, I might pull the filter skin off and then just run the raw filter. But I don't usually even mess with it. That's probably about it. If I can think of anything else at some point, maybe I'll doctor the video and let you guys know. But I'm going to post this up on my webpage, my YouTube page, RZ350YAM, and give you guys links to it so that you can set your bikes up for our Utah adventure in March 2020. I don't remember if I said anything about what I run for front tire air pressure. Typically 12 to 14 psi. We run heavy duty tubes, and with the fatty tires, the 9100s, they got more cush, and you'll have less likely chance to do a pinch flat on your front tire. But the 8100s probably not as good to run low pressures, although I know guys do. But yeah, the opportunity for pinch flats is very, very prevalent. Very, very prevalent in Utah. So just keep that in mind when you're setting your tire pressures. I think that's probably about it.